Our guest on this episode is as enthralling as is her latest book, but neither she or the book comes without a warning. A former Middle East war correspondent, she spent time in Israel and Palestine, including a significant stint in Gaza. Her first novel, Vulture, is based on her experiences during the 2012 conflict. I can't help but wonder, PG, how much of it is fiction? Given the current atrocities in the region and the absence of journalists on the ground, her book arrives at a crucial moment in history, one that implores us all to bear witness and take a stand. I've known this little Aussie-British lass with Irish roots for years, and I'm thrilled to bits to be here in her hometown of London on the eve of her book launch. Phoebe Greenwood, welcome to Three Food Memories and welcome to Podcast House.
Sava, thank you so much for having me, Dal.
What's going on? How are you feeling?
Currently, I am pretty strung out, honestly. I mean, it's the first book. It's a work of fiction, but it's set in something that's so political and so charged. And I'm just, it's been a baby that I've been running for like 10 years and now it's landing. And I just, I have no idea how it's going to land.
So you said earlier you've jumped out the window and you're waiting to
see how I land or splat. One or the other.
Well, so where are you at the moment in the free fall?
At the free fall, I'm just like hovering above the ground, waiting if it's going to be a full frontal, if I'll do a miraculous land on the pause. We'll see. Obviously, it's a vulnerable thing with any kind of creative work. Suddenly, you're actually sharing it, and particularly when you're writing something, I don't know how other people do it, but I definitely wrote this book not even thinking about people reading it. I think I was getting something out, and but at the same time, there's stuff that I wanted to say and I needed to say, and so I'm glad it's coming out. I'm really excited for people to read it. I'm really happy to be having conversations around the topics brought up in the book, but of course, it's a bit frightening.
What's the frightening bit?
Such a good question, Sav. What is the frightening bit? I think it's being misunderstood. Or the book not resonating in the way that you'd hope, because once, you've done something, you've put it out there, it's no longer yours. People read it, they'll take with it from they want, and I hope that they're taking it in the spirit in which it's meant, because it's quite as you kind of alluded to, it's not an easy read necessarily, and it brings up some really challenging stuff. There's a lot of violence in it, a lot of sex. The protagonist is not necessarily likable all the time. So, it's going to be interesting to see what people take from it.
But your job as a writer is to show and not tell, though, and you're leaving it to your audience to interpret.
Yeah. Well, exactly right. But it's so funny what people take from it that you had no idea, and that's kind of exciting. But it's also that I think that's where the scariness lies, from a complete control freak.
Right. How long were you a war correspondent in the Middle East?
In the Middle East, I moved to Jerusalem in 2010. I had been a freelance correspondent.
How old were you, Phoebe? Let's do some numbers.
Don't
Early
ask a lady
30s.
that.
No, let's put it in context. Because
I was 28 years old. Was I? Jeez. Well, I'm born in 1981. How old was I?
Wow. You were young.
Yeah, I was young. But I've been doing it.
And brave.
Now, was I brave? This is exactly, that's the thing. In some ways brave in that it was a risk, but I mean, it was also something that I was really curious about. I moved to Israel, Palestine because I had been a freelance based out of London. And I was at this point in news where there used to be a budget to send people who had a good story anywhere. So I had been lucky when I started out being sent various places to report different stories. I've been to like Nicaragua, kind of Africa. And then the news budget started drying out and I knew I had to base myself somewhere. And I went to do a couple of stories out of the West Bank and Israel. And I was like, right, I know I need to be here. I just had a feeling about it. I felt strangely at home, which is a weird thing. Everyone seems to look like my cousin Philippa. And but also I didn't understand it. It was one of those conflicts I just couldn't get my head around. And so I felt the need to just be there and get a better understanding of it.
Were you conflicted within the conflict?
Was I conflicted within the conflict? I think, no. I think, when you go out somewhere as a journalist, there is that, hopefully you're going with that kind of dispassionate, let me see. You're curious. It was obviously, though, quite quickly very shocking. I think, and this is something that I hope comes out in the book, that there's a lot, particularly in very complicated political stories, and I think there's very few that are as complicated as Israel Palestine. You can get a bit lost in it because it is too complicated and people kind of don't get it. And they're like, there's lots of words like occupation and blockade and it's been going on for so long. And what does it actually mean? It was really shocking to me going through the West Bank and seeing the reality of what the occupation looks like.
From a human
point of view, what you're seeing there is, you know, the Israeli soldiers manning the checkpoints are all kids. And they have to do their military service, and they often do it there, and they're probably pretty terrified.
Themselves.
The soldiers, right? But the population who is being policed by an occupying force, essentially, you know, you've got old women. What the reality is, old women standing for hours in the sun to get through a checkpoint, to get from one side of their property to the other. You know, you've got just daily humiliations. You've got an apartheid system of roads. So the actual main roads and all the kind of big signage, it's meant to be Palestinian territory, but it's all Israeli. If you had no idea, you know, it's only Israeli cars meant to be driving on these roads. It's Israeli signposts, and the Palestinian roads are quite dangerous, back roads that are kind of poorly kept, and they have to be extremely circuitous to get through different checkpoints. And, you know, the settlements dominate the landscape, and it's just so brutal.
How did it compare to other war regions that you'd been to?
I hadn't seen that many wars. I mean, I'd been to Yemen, but again, that was a civil conflict that was happening at a certain point, and I reported it from a distance. I was never on the front line. I was close to it, and I was reporting from the refugee camps. I'd been to Pakistan, but that was to areas under the Taliban. But again, that was kind of more of an insurgency. This is a completely different ballgame. You're looking at an entirely militarized society. I mean, there's not 1 inch of Palestine because there are parts of Israel that feel really normal. Not that the population doesn't feel under threat and anxious, but there are very normal parts of Israel. There's not one part really of Palestine that doesn't feel as if it's in some kind of military complex. Obviously, there's Ramallah and there's Nablus and there's some of the bigger cities that feel, you know, but they have a very small area in which to be normal.
And Phoebe, you know, if we were to divide it into two sides, you know, do you get the feeling that both sides are being controlled?
Sav, that's so interesting. I think, okay, so there's an expression that I was told, there was kind of some kind of glib advice that I was given when I moved to Jerusalem by the old hand correspondents there, which is the first year here, you're going to hate the Israeli government. The second year here, you're going to hate the Palestinian leadership. The third year here, you're going to hate yourself. And then it's a good idea that you leave.
Why would you hate yourself?
Because you feel so frustrated, and because you're reporting on a conflict that is in these cycles that you see coming and nothing's going to change and no one's listening. And there's this kind of self-loathing that comes with the cynicism of giving up trying to tell the story. But in terms of control, I think both populations are at the whim of politicians who are out for survival. You know, you have Netanyahu there who is now, I don't know, perhaps he's going through a period of kind of a lot of popular support, having just had the conflict with Iran. But the guy should be in prison. I mean, he's on so many corruption charges that aren't being pursued because he's constantly at war. And you have the same thing with Hamas in Gaza. You know, without conflict, those guys would not be in power. So it feels very much like both populations are being dragged constantly into conflict by politicians whose interests are served by the conflict being sustained. And it's completely heart-wrenching and depressing and sad.
And do you think that, you know, you've had some time away, what, 13 years now?
Well, yeah, I was last back in 2018.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
So the book now, is this a book, your reaction?
You know what? Because I've covered it, I kept covering it. I was going back and back. So I came back for a job at The Guardian on the foreign desk, and then I became a reporter again, and I went regularly back to the West Bank and Gaza. And so I've written about it a lot. But there are certain very necessary rules within news journalism. You know, you can't really have feelings because they sound like bias. there's not a huge amount of room for the nuance and complexity of the human lives that are involved with this story. You know, you can tell headlines, you can say, you know, as we hear about, you know, 64,000 now dead in Gaza, or, you know, more than 1,200 taken by Hamas or killed by Hamas, or 250 hostage. You know, it becomes numbers. What I couldn't do is go into the really messy, complicated, knotty, heartbreaking, funny, you know, the real life of Gaza. I just felt like I couldn't really get it out. I couldn't really say what I needed to say or wanted to say or get out of my experience there and about being a journalist in these conflict zones in journalism. It was the kind of stuff that could only be expressed in fiction because it was messy and it was full of feelings, complicated, unresolved feelings. And it was full of self-reflection and, like, you know, it's self-critical and self-satirizing. And so that's when I guess when I say that I wasn't writing it necessarily for other people to read, I was just kind of writing it just to resolve all this stuff that I couldn't resolve through journalism.
So, okay, so if you're not brave, are you inquisitive?
Definitely inquisitive. And the brave thing is interesting, Sav, because I think this is one of the reasons I kind of really wanted what I was trying to get at in this book, because when I came back to London 2014, you hear a lot of people telling you you're brave for doing this stuff and that there's the kind of like war correspondents are brave people. I mean, is it brave to put yourself in a dangerous situation that you don't have to live in? I mean, you're not going there just out of the
because you
goodness
can
of your own
leave
heart.
anytime.
You can leave at any time and you're going to get stories out of it. You're advancing your career at the same time as trying to tell, you know, hold power to account and bear witness. That's all true and it's all good and noble. And there are some incredible people doing that. But to say it's brave, I think what's brave is being able to really hold power to account, to really challenge, you know, because at the moment we're seeing politicians doing horrendous things in the name of their people, in the name of security and in the name of, you know, liberation. I felt racked with the guilt of not sounding the alarm clearly and soundly enough, because there are words that you're not allowed to use in journalism in the interests of impartiality and to avoid bias. You know, you shouldn't really say apartheid system in the West Bank, but that's what it is. And there's been a lot of debate around the word genocide in Gaza. But if this isn't ethnic cleansing, if this isn't, you know, 64,000 people being killed, then you know, what is it? But again, the whole debate around genocide again gets us away from the point of the fact that this is 64,000 people who have been killed. There is 100% of a population on the brink of famine. That's not okay. Then we get into this whole kind of false equivalency and kind of this parity that doesn't really make any sense, because it just needs to stop. And it feels very frustrating that, you know, political leaders and even a lot of the media is just so mealy-mouthed about it. It feels like there isn't the necessary outrage to the crimes that we're seeing committed in front of us. And I think that's why people are turning away from the news a bit, because it's like, this is too horrific to watch. This is relentless. It feels hopeless. Where is the unequivocal moral condemnation?
So is that the third year that people tell you? That is this where we're at?
That's it. The self-loathing. What they don't tell you, Sav, is that it doesn't just last 1 year. It goes on and on and on. And then you're left with it. And then you write really gory books.
So we're going to get more into this, because I'm just listening and I'm thinking, keep talking, Phoebe. We've only got a short. No, I know I want it all. So we're about to hop into your food memories, and your food memories are all about people. You're here for a human story. What is it about humanity that gives you a boner? I can only say that to you because I know the conversations we've had off mic.
It's them being really hot. No. So what I really liked about being a journalist in the first place is that I got to travel to these places I couldn't even imagine, you know, like places in purest imagination, like rural Pakistan, which is so beautiful and it's so different and different cultures. And what I always found really staggering about these places is that they didn't feel so different. You know how I was talking earlier, you know, like everyone in like Israel, like my cousin Philippa, everyone felt very familiar, even in the most remote places. And you get this immediate intimacy with people like in the middle of rural Zambia, or again, that like in the middle of, I'm thinking of this particular woman in the middle of Pakistan. I was covering the floods there, and we had set up an interview, but we couldn't find her in this beautiful old farm. My God, it was stunning. And we couldn't find her. We were saying, hello, hello, and kind of walking through the house. And she was sitting on her bed with a big Quran open in front of her praying. And she was praying. She was like, come here, come here. And I just met her, and she was like, she held my hand, and she was like, I'll be with you in a minute, but kept on praying. And she just felt like an old mate, you know, and it was these, or just some woman who you wished was your grandmother. You know? And I was always staggered by the fact that everywhere you go, you find people who feel really familiar. And I guess that's what it is. And it's the commonalities and that feeling of it kind of really, because you can, particularly in journalism and generally in life, we know it's like we're so prone to cynicism and otherness and polarization. And when in fact, I think that
you fight really hard against that stuff, don't you?
Yes.
Again, it's a real big thing for you to keep it.
You know, I find misanthropy really dark. I think it frightens me. And I think I really truly believe that if people went back to the humanity of things, if they went back to the kids and the kind of the mums and the funny old dudes, you know, rather than the politics, then I just don't know if any of this would be possible.
A First Nations man I spoke to at a lunch just recently said, he said, we need to remember the lullabies of our grandparents.
Oh.
And that kind of was like, well, take me now, that's it. That is the answer to everything.
I think so.
Your first memory starts with your Australian grandmother teaching you how to make jam drops. You were 6.
Yes.
Tell us about this.
Yes. Okay, so my grandmother, who we didn't call grandmother or anything like that, she was called Helen. Incredibly...
Very sensible, Helen.
Helen was not necessarily sensible. She was really funny, and she was tough, and she was glamorous, and she had beautiful hair that got done once a week, and she only wore yellow. She wore many, many yellow Target sweaters, and she had beautiful nails, and she was tough as hell and very, very funny. And I remember her, she didn't have that much time for children. You got on well with Helen when you got into your teens. You could have a laugh and, you know, maybe a drink in the evening. But kids are a bit like, okay, like, don't, you know, just let's get on with it. And Mum had left me with Helen, and she was like, right, we're gonna make some jam drops. Big on tea in our household, lots of tea, lots of scones and tea, but jam drops weren't. Anyway, so I remember her putting me to work creaming the butter and sugar, and I love baking, but in my household, I was allowed to use the electric beater. Not with Helen. No. So she gave me a wooden spoon that was this, oh God, it's so, even though a wooden spoon, it had been completely almost sawn in half just through use, you know, and it was it was in Chatswood. It was always, I remember being hot, and the radio was always on. It's the races. And, you know, that is such a nostalgic sound for me now, the races, you know, that in the really Aussie monotone, going on in the other room. And Helen, I think, was making lunch or something, and she was getting me to beat the butter and sugar. And I was like, God, this is good. Like, from, you know, and I was six years old or 7. My little muscles were going, and I was like, surely, you know, because my mum gave me quite an easy ride. I was like, done. And she's like, you're not done. You're not done. Keep going, keep going, keep going. And she wanted me to properly cream it. It took me about 45 minutes, and I kept thinking I'd be done, and I wasn't done. And she wasn't giving me an easy ride. She was like making me. I was like, well, surely I can just use the electric beater. She's like, well, how will you know what it's meant to look like? How are you meant to know how it feels? You know? And for me, looking back on it, because Helen died when I was a teenager, and I was one of the youngest grandkids, and in our household, she's revered, like it's Helen and it's the Virgin Mary. You know?
Is this the Irish Catholic part of your family?
Yes. The Irish Catholic part of the family. And I wish I'd spent more time with her, but she taught us all to be incredibly resilient and tough, and she's funny. You could always make a joke about things. You can make a joke about shitty men, about tough times, but you know, the humor got you through. And I think this was a real lesson to me in that if you want something to be done right, and if you care about it, it's always going to take effort. And
hard work or effort?
That's a good distinction, because I sometimes put too much effort into things. Hard work, and I think it's tenacity, and it's not giving up. Care, but I think the things that have really mattered to me in my life that have been really hard, and most things you really want are really hard, it just takes hard work. You just got to get your nose down and do it.
Did Helen ever give you little secret bits of encouragement on the side? Would she ever say, did she ever give you a slight pat on the back? Was there any?
Oh, yeah. No, I think she was a lot, I think it's often the case with grandparents, right? They're a bit softer with grandkids.
Well, it's their second chance to get parenting right, isn't it?
That's it.
But all care, no responsibility.
That's
Here
it.
you go.
Although she had quite a lot of care. I don't know. So, but she was very loving, and she's very close to my cousin Michelle, who's one of my most adored people on earth. She's like a sister. And so in a way I get a bit of Helen through Michelle now, I feel. But no, she was, if Helen said something good to you or nice to you or praised you on something, it was like
Value.
huge.
Yeah.
Because my mum was full of positive reinforcement. My mum told me I could do absolutely anything. It was lovely. Thank you, Mum.
But that's of an era though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But Helen, if she said something good, if she said something, you did something well, you're walking around like the bee's knees for days.
Do you feel Helen when you're writing something?
I feel Helen when I'm really, really terrified of anything. Then I'll say 3 Hail Marys. And I'll think, what would Helen do? And she's like, sometimes when I'm really anxious about, getting on a flight or meeting a guy for the first time or something, he's like, what? Hell? Is this good? Is this not good? What's going on? And I can really feel her at those moments. When I was writing, not so much. I mean, God, there's so much sex in the book. I just hope she wasn't looking.
Thinking about your granny.
Please don't read it, Helen.
So you are funny in an English roast type way.
That sounds like a backhanded compliment.
No. If you were a Sloane Ranger.
I was for a time.
How long did that last?
My Sloaney phase?
Yeah.
16 to 18, Sav.
Did you work out quite quickly, nah, this is not me. I'm an Aussie girl at heart?
I am not English. I think that's definitely been proven to me. I don't feel that, I don't think they particularly get me and I don't particularly get them. I don't get the class system for a start.
Right.
I don't get having to behave in a certain way because someone's father's 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 father got on well with a certain politician. I just think it's nonsense. I don't like deference without, just for deference's sake. I like respect, and I think everyone should be treated with respect. But the English class system, don't get it, don't like it.
Is that a bit of Helen? I'm just feeling like a bit of Irish sensibility.
That's very Irish sensibility.
Isn't it?
Yeah. So that's, and it's in fact very much my mother. My mother brought me up to never think that anyone was better or worse than you. So you treated everyone with respect, but you weren't intimidated by anyone. And I think that was actually quite handy as a journalist because it meant you were as comfortable speaking to someone in a refugee camp as you were in a kind of a senior politician.
So born in Australia, why did your family move to the UK?
My dad's English, to Irish mum, but he's English.
Protestant?
Catholic.
Catholic.
All the Catholics.
Wow.
Well, in fact, no, my mum's dad was from Armagh, which is a Protestant part of Northern Ireland. And my grandmother, Helen, is from Tipperary, which is another part of Ireland, which is Catholic, from the Republic. And he converted to Catholicism to make her marry him.
So conflict has been around. I mean, you've
Troubles in
known
our
of
house.
yeah, right. So you're no stranger to conflict.
No.
And conversation around it.
No.
So and also you're no stranger to the communications industry. Your mum, both parents were in comms. What did they do? What did mum do?
My mum was a journalist from, age 17. She left school and went into journalism, where she met my dad, who was also at a newspaper in Sydney at the time. So they met on a newspaper. Mum went on to be a columnist and then write books. She's published 15 books, my mother.
Varied subjects?
Novels. And then she wrote a whole series of, because she wrote a column in the end about us called Family Life in the Mail on Sunday. So growing up, all my boyfriends were discussed publicly.
Fodder.
Just call one of them the pig. I don't think that went down very well. So mum did that. And then she wrote a series of things called like A Mother's Guide to Life, Mother's Guide to Husbands, extraordinarily. What to Do About Everything.
And what did she do about everything?
What did she do about everything? What can't this woman do? She did a lot. And then my dad was started off in journalism, but then went into TV, and he was a producer of chat shows. So in the UK, that was Parkinson and Terry Wogan. And then he came to when Mum brought us back to Sydney to be near her family, and she was writing a book that was based in the North Shore. And Dad came and he took a job on Vizard. So he did. Yeah, he's like the Saturday night chat show guy.
And what do you remember of Dad's working life from that time?
Well, Dad was at that time, he was working every week in Melbourne, and we were based in Sydney. So it was very much a kind of woman-only house, because it's I've got two older sisters, and my mum. So it was us most of the time, and he came back on the weekends. But
did it mean anything? Because Parky was in Australia he did a series here.
Yeah, I think Dad brought him over. Dad was involved in that for sure.
Did those people mean anything to you back then?
You know, I found it really embarrassing. I found that being impressed because you know the point of a chat show is you bring on celebrities and you talk to them and da 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 da. And I found it all a bit uncomfortable that people were so impressed by these famous people. I was like, who cares? You know, you're impressed by. So Dad, I know, would try and get us along to the filming of shows when we came back to the UK on Friday. And, you know, we went to show support for Dad, but none of us was particularly impressed by it. And I think that's down to our mother.
What a great sign.
Well,
that was down to Mum.
Probably, yeah.
And then how did you feel? Did you read all your mum's books?
Sava, don't out me. I read most of them, Sava. My favourite is a book called All You Need to Know. But it had weird sex in it. Not weird, sorry, Mum. It was perfectly normal sex, but it's weird because my mum wrote it.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, it was great. I love that book. That's a fabulous book. Everyone should read that book. All You Need to Know by Barbara Toner.
Barbara Toner. So she wrote 15 other books?
Yeah, no, it's something like that. 15 in total. I think her first book was journalistic. It was The Facts of Rape.
Wow, when did she write that?
She was young. She was in her 20s.
So 20s, and we're talking 70s. Are we talking the 70s in Australia at the time?
Well, so what happened is Mum, Dad met in Sydney. They got married when Mum was ludicrously young. Dad was 10 years older. And then they moved quite quickly back to London together, where I think Mum was suddenly stunned by like Dad's Tory friends and kind of suburban London, and kind of had a month of depression, and then bucked up and they moved into Marylebone and had fun.
Now, you were working on a very quality publication in Australia, weren't you?
Yeah. No, absolutely. Women's Day, absolutely.
What the fuck were you doing on that publication?
I was the foreign editor. Thank you very much. I did a really poor job on Women's Day. Thank you so much for the people who dealt with it.
But you were getting firsthand real stories.
I was not. I had no sources. I was a very poor celebrity journalist. And it's like, you know, it's sod's law, isn't it? With me, with my like not impressed by famous people. Not only was that my first like big job at a magazine, I then came back to London where I worked at Grazia, and all I wanted to do is be a features writer. I was trying to get them to send me to, again, Pakistan. And they're like, nah, you're going to be the party editor. So my job in my 20s was to go to every single celebrity event in London and I wasn't allowed to go home until the last celebrity had left. And I had to go up to people like Sadie Frost and go, Sadie, what are you eating for breakfast? You know, what diet you on? Who you dating?
Could Sadie see that you were just like, sorry, I'm really sorry, but I've got to do this? There are bigger questions I'd like to ask you.
If I could have said that with my face.
Yeah.
Then, you know, what's interesting, though, is that people play the game. And after a certain time, they know who you are and what you're doing there. And if they want to tell you something, they'll just come over and tell you something. But the worst was I was at something at the Tate, an event at the Tate, and I was sent there because Paul McCartney was there, and he had just split up with Heather Mills McCartney. Ugh. Yes. And I was like, I'm just going to be here. I'm staying in there. And the paparazzi used to dob on me to my boss, and I got a furious phone call from my editor going, you have not approached anyone. I can hear you're not doing your job. So I had to go.
But it's not a matter of not doing your job. It's a matter of respecting their space, isn't it?
Thank you, Sava.
Yeah.
So what I ended up doing is going up to Paul McCartney, the lyric of every single song that he's ever written that I know by heart and love, and went up to Paul McCartney and I just had to go. The thing that came out of my mouth was, I'm so sorry for your troubles, Paul. Like some kind of IRA widow. went back to A, glowering at the paparazzi who I knew were going to be domming on me.
Yeah,
Terrible. But you know what it does? And I've got, if you're born with a bit too much pride, that job will knock it out of you.
Right.
Can't be too prideful in life. So.
Who did you like getting yarns out of?
Honestly, I was so bad at my job, I don't think I got very many yarns. I did get very few yarns. I got almost no stories. I was a total failure as a celebrity journalist.
Well, now we're going to take the cue and move on to your second food memory.
Yes.
Now if this doesn't scream Australia summer to you, fry shop, I don't know what fucking does. Potato scallops with passiona with my mama on the beach.
That's one of my favourite ever memories, let alone food memories. But it's such a good... Okay, so...
I think you've got to be really clear on let's just describe the scallop first. We know what a beach looks like. We know what it smells like. We know there's white sand in Australia.
Yeah.
Talk about the scallop. Let's be really specific.
Really
Hone
specific.
In,
so I have tried this many, many times because it's very important to me, and anyone who I love needs to understand what a potato scallop is. So there'll be many non-Australians I've tried to describe this to. And the closest I've come to is it's a very long piece of potato that's been tempuraed, but it's not really tempuraed.
That's a big glam.
It's wrong, isn't it? It is just, okay, so the potato needs to be soft and it needs to be like salty, even though it's within salted, crisp batter, and the batter needs to crunch and it needs to be covered in salt. I mean, if you're really going for it, you can cover it in chicken salt.
Which is something that they don't have here in the UK.
Which is something that the UK...
I think it's buckets of MSG chicken salt, isn't it?
Total, exactly. It's pure deliciousness. What is it? Is it basically a stock cube crumbled up?
Yeah, it is stock cube crumbled up with salt and business. I don't really know. I try not to stay away from it because, except I tell you the closest thing I come to it in the world, it's KFC. Like it's all over that.
Oh, don't get me started. I love KFC. But no.
This is your food memory. Let's go back to
the potato scallop. Okay, so the thing as well is that the importance of the potato scallop wasn't something that I came to by myself. I inherited it. So my mother is passionate about the scallop. So she and I share an absolutely like ardent love affair with potatoes, which is probably also in the gene pool, let's be frank. But Mum always used to tell me that she was given her bus money to get home from school, but rather than get the bus, she would walk like an hour in the heat.
Oh, they all walked an hour in the heat. They all walked an hour.
Is there a parent that didn't walk an hour in the heat?
And we'd wear out our shoes and we weren't allowed to buy new. And I was like, okay.
Okay. All right. Could just caught the bus though. And she spent it on her potato scallop. And so when we were having a loving mum-daughter kind of bonding time, it always involved the potato scallop. And this was like the rare thing that we're allowed for junk food. Once in a blue moon, we got a drive-through McDonald's. But the real thing was a potato scallop. And the thing that Mum would always do is that we'd have to get it with a passiona, which no longer exists.
Oh, well, I'm sorry, but I brought this back with me.
No.
Brought this with me, and it's passiona.
I could actually cry.
Well, it's actually, do you have a soda stream? Do you know what that is?
We can't because it's in the occupied West Bank, the soda stream. Don't.
So actually have this with fizzy water, but it's like fizzy a cordial. Water. It's a passiona. Like syrupy thing. Well, we have them in cans as well. And there was no fucking way I was going to bring it back, bring it in my suitcase up the hill.
You don't understand. This is going to be next to my chicken salt. And I'm going to, if anyone touches it, they're going to be like.
So you can just have little bits of it with your fancy Scottish sparkling water.
Honestly, the best present anyone's ever given me.
So back.
I love you so much.
I loved you before I hope you loved me before the passiona.
Well, I wasn't sure. Now I know.
So this is your story. Keep going to the potato scallop. Okay.
So the thing for me, though, it was a very, very bonding thing with my mum. Because my mum is very funny and we're very, very close. But her thing is always like, I'm not your best friend, I'm your mum. You know, that was important, I think, because it kind of created a kind of, because there were those mothers who were a bit like, you know, like ice cream bed, let's talk about boys kind of stuff. And we were very close, me and mum, but there was always, I'm your mother and you're my child, you're not my best pal. However, there were these moments when we'd go and we'd both like be kind of covered in kind of salty fingers and having a funny little giggle on the beach. And it felt like she was my pal in those moments. And it was just also bloody delicious. But yeah. And also for me, it became a really nostalgic thing when I left Australia. I really missed Australia because, as I said, I don't really feel very English. And we moved back to London when I was 12. And I didn't have the easiest time. I got sent to a private girls' school, which mum and dad thought was by far the best thing for me in terms of education, which I'm sure they were right. But I'd rather they saved the money and sent me to a good state school. Anyway, thank you, mum and dad, for all your sacrifices. However, I didn't have, English girls' schools are tough. And it was things like potato scallops that would really make me incredibly homesick, like caramello koalas, cherry ripes, golden gay times, the best ice cream of all time, and the potato scallop.
How often do you get back home to Australia?
As often as I can. I really miss it. I'd say, though, every 2 years if I can. I'm hopefully, the book's coming out in Australia in November, Australia and New Zealand. And so hopefully I'll be over early next year, to do some sort of book festivals and stuff.
Wow.
So I'll be over then.
And what's the first thing you eat as soon as you land on hallowed ground?
Okay, so
There is.
there is a ritual and it's at Bronte Beach, and I go for a big swim in Bronte, which is actually not the easiest beach because it's got that big dump. Anyway, if I don't get dumped, big nice swim, come up, then there's a restaurant midway up, and I have salt and chili squid and a big glass of white wine.
That's your Aussie landing gear.
Yeah, depending. That'd be the first meal if I possibly could. But then there's also toasted Turkish bread with butter and veggie, with a delicious flat white. And occasionally, my cousin as well, Michelle, got me into the idea of, and it's now I can't not do it, is when you've come, it's kind of quite hot and you've landed and you've had a long haul flight, no matter the time of day, beer in the shower.
Beer in the shower?
Beer in the shower. It's the most refreshing thing in the entire world.
Who is this Michelle?
She's, you need to meet her. She's the best.
I wonder what other tricks of the trades or she probably helped your mum write that book. What was that book called?
What used about everything. Well, Michelle does. She's got this amazing shop in Paddington, Bob's General Store, and it has got absolutely everything there that you kind of want and you didn't know you needed. And it's she's pretty good.
She's a curator of life.
She's a curator of life.
Let's get off the beach now. Let's get away from the food and let's get really gritty. War news industry.
Yes.
I mean, the title Vulture is quite provocative. What does it represent for you in the context of war journalism?
So you'll probably know this, Sav, but the term vulture is a kind of self-deprecating way that journalists, war correspondents use to describe themselves because they make a living out of death and destruction. So they kind of feed off death, much like, like a vulture. And because this is a kind of self-deprecating, self-satirizing book, it works in that way. But, there's also, without any kind of wanting to be any spoilers, there's a lot of birds in the book. And symbolically, that's important for me as well. So it worked on that level because, I've loved myths since I was a kid. And in myth, birds are often messengers. Odin had his ravens, thought and memory. So there's a bird that arrives to talk to our protagonist who's so cut off from her own emotions. And so it's through the bird that we get a sense of this character's interiority and the kind of soul that she's disconnected from. And it kind of is like the birds become a symbol of grief.
I'm gonna interrupt you here, and I know I'm gonna get in trouble for it. A heaviness comes over you once you start talking about war journalism. Yeah. Why?
Wars are horrific. So obviously, I know that's a kind of statement of the obvious, but I think it's often forgotten because I think that it's a profession that's being glamorized in a way that I feel uncomfortable with, because what you're doing on a day-to-day is you're visiting morgues, you're counting dead, you are going to the sites of massacres, you are speaking to people who have lost entire families, you are speaking to people who have been maimed, you are speaking to people who have lost everything. And that's not glamorous. It's hard going. It's hard going. And I think it takes a toll on you. It's a lot and I think in a way Sarah is a callous character. She's very emotionally detached from the horrors that she's seeing around her. She's very cynical. That's exaggerated, but it's pretty typical. And I think it's necessary in a way, because if you were to really live in the horror that you're seeing in these conflict zones, you wouldn't be able to get through it. You wouldn't be able to approach it with the impartiality or the distance needed to be analytical, to be able to get the facts that you need to get the various opinions you need to get to actually be able to put it down on paper and get it out there. I think you need to have a certain remove. And that's where the humor comes in as well.
How, again, I'm interrupting you because I'm fascinated by this. How strong do you have to be for the people that you are writing about to be next to them, to show them, hey, you know what? It's going to be okay. It's pretty shit right now.
You just gave me a chill. Look.
Yeah. Because there is, if I were you and knowing you, I know you'd be in there like fighting their side.
I think,
and it doesn't matter which side
yes,
they were on, you'd be fighting.
One of the first interviews I had, this isn't in Gaza, this was again in Pakistan, and it was funny enough, Grazia, who I fought, and they finally sent me to go and do a piece about honor killings in Pakistan, and this was the first really hardcore story I'd done in a foreign story. I was interviewing this tiny, vulnerable woman who had escaped an abusive husband, and she was running for her life, and she was if either the husband or the father caught her, she'd be killed. And she had told me her story, and at the end she said, "You're going to help me, right? You're going to protect me. Are you going to Tony Blair was the prime minister at the time. Tony Blair will help me." And I had to say no. I mean, you can't lie. And like that feeling is almost, that's the worst feeling. The worst feeling is that, and this is what comes up in the book, and I put it in the mouth of little Jihad's mum, which is that horrible feeling that you are there and you are getting people in their most vulnerable moments, when they've lost loved ones, when they have lost their homes, when they're scared for their lives. And you are interrupting that moment in their life to ask them to tell you how they're feeling, what they've experienced, and what are you going to do with that? You're going to write it into a story. Maybe it's going to be 600 words. Maybe people are going to read it, maybe they're not. You are speaking to them because you want them to be heard, because you want their story out, but also because you're obliged to generate words from the place that you're covering, right? And you want to make an impact with them, but you have no guarantee. You then have to deal with an editor who might edit them out. You are dealing with people who may tune out because so many people are with the current conflict in Israel, Palestine. It's so overwhelming, people can't even look. And so what are you doing? Why are you there? Interrupting this horrifying moment in this person's life. And so there's a huge sense of responsibility and guilt and grief that comes with that you can't process in the time, because if you did, you would be a mess and you'd fall apart. And I think some people do, and that's very human. But for me, it came after I left and I was full of that self-loathing we spoke about earlier. Did I do enough? Why was I really there? Did I do enough to try and get the reality of what the situation is out, these human stories, because you are overwhelmed by the conviction that if people could see what was going on there, if people saw, like you saw, what the reality of life is like in Gaza, no one would accept it. And that's your job and that's your responsibility. And if you don't do that, all these people who've trusted you with their stories, are you letting them down? Like, it's difficult.
Is war news lucrative financially?
Some people it can be. For some people it can be. You're never gonna be Jeff Bezos, but people do fine. And if you are a staff correspondent with a big news outlet, particularly the Americans, you have all your travel costs taken care of. You're staying in the best hotels because you need the best internet. You're doing a really hard job. I mean, it's high risk and it's hard on the soul. It's hard work. So you are, there's no question about what your expenses for food. Your safety is paramount if you're one of those staff correspondents. So you're given all the right flak jackets. You're often given security to take care of you. You work with local fixers who can give you all the advice you need and all the kind of support you need. But what about the local journalists is what I was always thinking. You have the fixers who often take the biggest risks. And where is their support? I mean, often the big news organizations, The Guardian, for example, who I worked with a very long time, is very good at this. But I always felt really uncomfortable, Sav, particularly like in Gaza, where at the end of a conflict, you've worked really closely with your Palestinian colleagues. You've both been under airstrikes together. you've been through it together. You become a kind of family. And then the war ends and you get dropped at the border all kind of excited to go home and have a proper shower and have a beer. And they can't leave. And then that family is just, the artifice of that is severed quite brutally, where you go off and they stay. And that felt really bad as well.
Have you ever known a time in your career where there's been relatively peace and quiet in the news on the war fronts?
You know, actually, yeah. I mean, there was a status quo, particularly in Israel and Palestine, in like, when was it? Yeah, I mean, like between 2010 to like 2014, there were wars every 3 years in Gaza. It's what the retired Israeli military generals called mowing the lawn. Every 3 years or 2 years, there's a kind of a military incursion to trim back Hamas infrastructure, is how it's termed. But that was the status quo. The occupation was the status quo. I mean, globally, there's always conflict, right? I don't think there's ever been a period in the history of the world where there hasn't been a conflict simmering somewhere. But I do think that we, you know, following the Second World Wars and following Vietnam and following those massive conflicts, we were kind of in this maybe a kind of false sense of peace, and a kind of like, you know, oh God, maybe we've grown out of these kind of horrific conflicts. Maybe we've grown out of the horror, you know. But there's always something going on somewhere, and I think that what we're seeing now is just a kind of a natural cycle of war that has been humankind forever, hasn't it? But
Listen to us white people here talking about so foreign.
But we do have a tendency to tell conflict through. We have a tendency, the way the West that tells its own history is it's told through conflicts. You know, when you're learning history at school, it's the War of the Roses.
Yeah.
Then you you go through it all up until now, and there's a different way of seeing history, of course, which is, you know, we don't tell the kind of the history of the lovely things, the history of the moments when war was avoided, the history of kind of meetings of cultures and cultural development.
Well, those stories don't sell.
It's the way that we're used to, and here, you know, I like to avoid this conversation because I think it gets really reductive. But I mean, there is an argument that is a sort of a very male-centric version of telling history, and that there could be a different way of telling it.
It is very reductive, isn't it?
Yeah.
But I think I can see things changing.
Yes?
Yeah.
How do you see
really,
them changing?
I think people are more aware.
Yeah.
People are more aware, and people are becoming outside self, and they're realising, they're looking at, the only way we're going to get through this is if we have community. So people are building communities outside themselves. It's very slow. I wish it was quicker, but I'm definitely seeing, I mean, this visit to London, last night I took the boys to the ABBA Voyager show, and I just looked around at all these people enjoying themselves, but not on their own, with their parties, and they're all getting dressed up. And I mean, I know it's a very privileged situation, but there is some happiness, and it's spreading. I just wish it would fucking spread faster so we could get through.
Yeah.
But definitely, London seems to be a happier place. I mean, people are often stopping me and commenting on my children, which never ever.
Look, if someone didn't stop you and comment on your children, there'd be a major issue. Those children are remarkable.
But for someone to, you know, even on the tube, for someone to stop and take a moment out of their life and say something about, it's kind of like, yeah, this is a good sign. We are looking outside of self.
But Safa, what do you put that down to, the change? What do you think is causing the change?
I think the information. I think people are actually seeing, yes, it's probably the positive side of social media. I do think that people are kind of thinking for themselves, and they're probably working out that they have to survive, to get through to the next bit.
Yeah.
But that's just probably me being optimistic and hopeful, but I've never not known a life otherwise. So let's move on to your third memory. This is your episode. Your third food memory, age 29, being taught how to make mushaken. Masakan by your friend in Gaza.
Yeah. So I spent a lot of time in Gaza. So because it's one of those places, it's very difficult to get into. So I spent a lot of time there for a couple of reasons. I'll try not to go into the complexity too much. But in order to get into Gaza, since the blockade, which was imposed by Israel and Egypt once Hamas took power after the elections in 2007, you need Israeli permission to enter the territory if you're coming through Israel. And that's that comes with a press card, which is only given to staff correspondents at major news outlets. I was not a staff correspondent when I started. I was a freelance, so I didn't get a press card. God, the woman who gave out the press cards, God, was she frightening. Sharon Goldhammer, terrifying. Anyway.
Goldhammer.
Her name was Sharon Goldhammer, and she was a formidable lady. Anyhow, she would not give me a press card for years. And so what I would do is I was working as a kind of media consultant for NGOs, and occasionally they would give out permissions, and they would be 3-month permissions. And so I went for the entire 3 months because you didn't know when you were going to get another one. So I'd spend 3 months in there getting as many stories as I possibly could that I could then tell when I was out. So it's a long time.
Tell when you were out. You speak about it as if it were like prison.
It is a prison, Dal. It's a population of 2 million people penned in by like a fortress. You're in a fortress. So when you come in, and the process of getting into Gaza, which I mean this is all gone now, which is extraordinary to think about. But you would go in usually through Erez Crossing, which is this huge terminal building meets a sort of fortress kind of prison. And you go through the Israeli checkpoints, and then you go in these kind of automated, huge sliding concrete doors open and slam shut behind you, and you go through several of them. And then you go through this huge kilometers-long caged walkway to get to the first checkpoint of the Palestinian Authority, because Israel and Hamas won't have anything to do with each other, so the Palestinian Authority are the interim. And then you go through that checkpoint, and then you get to the Hamas checkpoint. So in order to get in and out, it's like going into the most high security prison you've ever been in and out of. Anyway, so you're in, and then you're in. And getting in is like such an ordeal that you stay. So I was there for 3 months, and I had my own flat, and that was kind of a strange situation of sort of trying to be at home in this very kind of unusual, difficult place. So you make friends, and I had made friends with this lovely girl and her sisters who I met through this charity. She kind of was doing some kind of freelance work for them as well. And they sweetly invited me over to their home one Saturday because, God, Palestinian food is good. Oof. Food in Gaza is quite different to the West Bank. It's spicier, more like Egyptian food.
Right.
And it is out of this world good. I keep on trying to think it'd be such a good idea to try and prior to this horrific war, I was trying to think, wouldn't it be nice to get some kind of chefs from Gaza out to do pop-ups? Anyway, it's another idea to talk about in the future. Anyway, so delicious food. This thing called moussaka, and it's this big chicken dish, and it's kind of on bread, and it's kind of delicious, kind of chickeny, kind of broth stuff, and it's covered with nuts and sumac. So good. I wanted to learn how to make it. She said she'd teach me. So it's this beautiful environment of her and her sisters, and it's just the most cute, gossipy, funny kind of sisterhood experience, and it lasted all day. And that's the funny thing. So, in our family, in our kind of very kind of like white Irish family, the woman's doing the cooking. She cooks for a couple of hours. You come in, you descend, you eat everything in 6 minutes or less, and then you're done. But this cooking process, even getting to the bird was brought in, and then it was cleaned for like half an hour with this kind of method of kind of rubbing it with lemon juice and flour, and you clean that and you wash it off with water, and then you put it in, and it's kind of like, but everyone's cooking together. So there's no lead cook. Everyone's cooking together, and they're showing me how it's done at any given time. And it was just the process of it was the point, and the love for the food, but also, it sounds like a terrible cliche, but it's true. It's just a really loving experience, and kind of the idea of cooking together and producing something together it was beautiful to me, and I felt very warm and welcome. And I still make that. I made it for my family one Christmas. It went down very well.
Whatever happened to your friend?
So this is the thing, and it was a very Gaza experience for me, where he was this very loving, warm, sweet, friendly girl, and she had done everything to try and make me feel part of her family, to make me feel welcome, to make me feel welcome in her home. And shortly after we had this Saturday together, I was taken aside by one of the senior colleagues at this NGO, and I was told, listen, there's something you need to know about this girl that's just come to light. We've just heard that, in fact, it's possible that when she was a teenager, she was approached by an Islamist movement who tried to radicalize her. And while nothing's happened, we're looking into it. And because of the sensitivity around any of that with NGO work in Gaza, if there's any suggested kind of terrorist affiliation, it would be completely damaging to the organization. They wouldn't be able to operate. So I was advised not to see her and have any more contact with her. And I did what I was told. And I did cut contact with her. And it just felt like the worst tragedy.
Look at your storytelling style. It weaves. It actually follows the pattern of life. There's intersection and it crosses, but your storytelling style really relies on the observation of human relationships and the way we interface with one another. So at what point did you realise you needed to turn your war correspondence experiences into Vulture?
It's funny. I always wanted to write fiction. So in fact, when I went into...
Did this book start off as non-fiction?
No. It was always going to be a novel. But all I ever wanted to do was write novels. And I went into journalism with a way of actually trying to fund my fiction writing, but also, which is a terrible idea. No one should ever do that. But also, I think what I loved most about it is being able to hear people's stories, people telling you their stories and then telling them. That's the thing I loved most about journalism. So when I sat down to write a novel, this wasn't actually the first thing I wanted to write, but it was the thing that came out. And I think if you write, how can I say this without sounding like a complete wanker? But I think people who write do it because that's how they process emotions.
Right.
We all have a different way of doing it, right? And for me, it all comes out in writing. That's just if I'm trying to write anything, even if I'm trying to work out an emotional situation with a friend, or if I'm trying to deal with something at work, I just work better putting it down on paper. And I think I sat down to write fiction. I'd left the Middle East. I was living once again in London, and I knew I wanted to write fiction. But the book that I was actually going to be my second book was parked because all this Gaza just started coming out. And I didn't even know it was in there. And, kind of real vivid memories. And I think it was stuff I felt like I really needed to exercise some things that I hadn't been able to do through journalism that all came out. And, you're right. It's all about how people relate with each other. And I think some of the most striking memories that I need to get down were conversations or dynamics between people and how that left me feeling. Whether it's the dynamic between the American news journalist complaining about her coffee to a Palestinian waiter whose family's getting bombed, or the way that journalists can handle themselves in an incredibly vulnerable and volatile environment where their story is the most important thing, or, the kindness with which people relate to one another, or, how is it to be a doctor in an emergency room in a war zone where you don't have any medical supplies? Those are the moments that really, I guess it's what makes an impact on me.
You must have a really strong sense of self-confidence because you've actually put the book now in the marketplace and you have every single person. It's out there now for everyone to comment on.
Yeah.
Is that part of jumping out of the building?
That is the jumping out the building. So I don't think there's much self-confidence there. I mean...
Get real.
No,
Really?
Honestly, I think it's a very vulnerable thing to do, to actually try and...
What's the vulnerable bit? Because you've actually agreed to having your stories being published. Like, it's actually...
Yeah.
These were things that were inside you.
But they were inside me and they weren't shared. And I think I think also it's that thing of being trained as a journalist where your feelings are not the important things. You shouldn't have feelings. Your observations, are those that should be factual and they should be impartial and they should be balanced. And in a way, that's what I inverted with this book. I was kind of doing a book about journalism that inverted all those principles, and it was all feeling and it was all gross, animal, monstrous kind of parts of the self as well. Like there's lots of kind of quite gross sex in it, and there's a lot of violence, and there's a lot of kind of awful opinions that come blurting out. And it's almost like, and it's about journalism. So I think the anxiety is that, there's the kind of journalistic mask that's ripped off and the human monster underneath. Not that Sarah's me, but it's not the side of news that anyone kind of gets to look at often. So, and it's not what you're meant to do.
My little Phoebe just grew up. Sorry, Joe. Welcome to your mid to late 40s.
Early 40s, Saba. Early 40s, thank you very much.
You've chosen MAP as your social cause.
I have.
Tell us what MAP does.
Medical Aid for Palestinians is just an extraordinary organisation that does life-changing work with actually bringing medical supplies into Gaza and treating people. There's been a difficulty in actually providing medical services in Gaza since the beginning of the blockade because there's been a lot that hasn't been allowed through. And there's a lot of really critical medical cases in Gaza. So it was doing good work before the conflict, and now it's just more necessary than ever. Because, again, we know about maybe 64,000. I mean, the Palestinian health authorities put the death toll at 55, but the Lancet and others put it more like 64,000. But that's people who are being killed. The injuries, the life-changing injuries, the ongoing medical difficulties that you get living with like poor nutrition and poor water, they're massive issues. And these people do extraordinary work.
When we asked you what you would like to discuss in your social cause, you said really it should be Gaza in general. You've had first-hand experience embedded in both Jerusalem and Gaza. Why do you believe all eyes should be on Gaza right now?
It's so difficult to look at, and I understand people not being able to look at it anymore because it's it feels so hopeless and so painful. But I think we need to be confronted with what our society is condoning. I mean, it's not just, our governments are, Australia less so, but the Brits, the Americans, the French are all in some way responsible for kind of what's happening under our watch. And, I just think if we don't look, we're doing a disservice to the people whose lives have been lost. I mean, the least you can do is watch.
Are governments globally, you mentioned a few countries, are governments globally aligning their policies in the region with the express will of their citizens?
Such an interesting question, isn't it? I think most people feel poorly represented. And I think most people in Israel and Palestine feel poorly represented. I mean, it certainly was the case when I was there that not everyone supports Netanyahu in Israel. When I was there, a lot of people really did not. And it's very much the same in Gaza. Most people really abhor Hamas, who are as vile to their population as they can be to the Israeli public, and that they are, they can be when I was there were kids getting beaten up for wearing skinny jeans. Neither of these politicians necessarily represent the interests of their public. And I think that a lot of us struggle to feel represented by the people who lead us. And that's a bigger conversation about democracy, isn't it, Sav? But all we can do is participate. And I think that the tendency to look away, the tendency to feel cynical both about the news and about our political system is a dangerous one, because I think the minute you start to detach and think, you kind of do feel that kind of feeling of misanthropy and these are not my people and this is not functioning as I want it to, so I'm going to disengage. I think that's when it becomes incredibly dangerous. And I like what you're saying about community, and I'm hopeful as well that actually, even if we don't feel represented by our politics, at least we can start representing ourselves.
I think it's all we've got.
Yeah, hopefully.
I think that's all. I think that's all we've got.
Yeah.
We have an MFK Fisher serve it forth tradition here at TFM, where our previous guest presents you with a dish, a metaphoric dish. Our previous guest, artistic director and lead violinist of the Australian Chamber Orchestra, Richard Tognetti, serves you karaji shrimps, which would be perfect with your scallops and a little bit of lime mayo.
What's the karaji?
It's like deep fried prawns. Like speaking of, tempura.
But thank you so much for this dish. It's like my dream dish. Thank you.
How do you? We're liking this right now.
I'm loving
with
this
the
dish.
side, little bit of the passione cordial.
Oh God, yeah.
So you're feeling complete with the dish.
This is like my dream dish. I'm obsessed with prawns.
What would you like to serve our next guest?
I would like to serve our next guest an authentic and totally delicious cacio e pepe.
And our next guest is Carolina de Ordetti, so she's going to love that. What would she like to drink it with?
Cipro.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Now, this is your opportunity to ask me a question. What would you like to ask?
Sav, can I ask you 2 questions?
You can.
The first is, how have you raised 2 of the best human beings that I've ever come across in my life? Number 1.
Number 1.
Number 2, what for you, I mean, because this is one of those incredible concepts where, you know, you bring people out through the kind of things that they love to eat, you know, through the kind of, which is a kind of real kind of comfort thing for a lot of people. What does food mean to you? I mean, in your life story as well, what's it offered you?
Food. Okay, let's start with what food. Oh, maybe do I start with the boys? Okay, so the question on the boys was what have I done? I think that I've never thought about leaving a legacy, but I made the decision to bring these boys into the world, and I had to. I mean, I knew they were going to be good with material stuff. Let's just move that aside. But it's one thing to have material, and it's one thing to have the material stuff taken away, and what are they left with? So I want to give them stuff that they can live in this world if those material things were not there. Boy Scout skills, just skills of gratitude, just to be able to get through the world. What would they have if they didn't have the shirt on their back? Humility. That's what I kind of, and it's a really hard thing because I've got to check in on with my own humility constantly. And there's so many things that I find myself giving up, and being held accountable for that I really don't like. I don't want to make myself accountable all the time. It's exhausting. But and the way I am with other people, I really have to check myself. And then when I find myself in compromising situations and, you know, do I really want to be a people pleaser? Like, how far do I want to go? And then I think, well, what advice would I give them? So I think, I mean, I don't know why I had children. It just felt like a natural thing that all the men in my family did. And so I did it, but as a result, I have to think about it. So that's why the boys are who they are.
Because they're both very self-confident while being very generous.
They know their space.
Yeah.
Yeah, they know their lane, and they know how much they can have, and they know what they should. And I'm quite grateful. This concept about making people feel comfortable, I want to hear every side of the story. So as you were speaking today, and you're giving me a perspective and a story of the Palestinians in Israel, I'm thinking about my Jewish friends in Israel who have both sides of the argument, and I struggle. I think about my own hideous time and experiences getting into Israel and getting out. I mean, that is another podcast actually. And then, you know, the light and the dark, it was constantly light and dark, and experiences I had there with my Israeli friends that you can't talk about. So I think getting everyone to a comfortable place to talk, I think it's the only way. And for everyone to be heard with respect.
Yeah.
It's hard.
How do people feel comfortable, Sav? How do you do it?
Why did you feel comfortable?
Didn't.
Look, I just think it's giving people, just honouring people and honouring their stories. Yeah. And I think if we all did that, like I'm listening to people that I don't agree with for that very reason. I want to understand how they got there. Yeah. That's kind of why I do it. Now, Phoebe.
Darling.
Vulture is your first book.
Yeah.
It's fiction. Given you are beyond your years, I mean, I know that, and we've heard it all today. What is it going to take for you to sit comfortably and write a memoir?
Memoir. Well, what fiction isn't memoir in a certain degree? I don't know if I'm up to memoir yet. I think maybe when I've got enough of the stories that I'm itching to tell as fiction out of me, because it's kind of itchy feeling where you kind of, I'm really anxious at the moment to get on with my next book. I think when it will feel like kind of helpful to do it. Maybe when I'm kind of a bit wiser, when I think that there's a story to tell. I'm not going to be like turning myself into a fable. But I mean, you know, maybe when I think it's a useful thing to do, I'll get there.
The book is going to be out in the UK shortly on the shelves?
Yes, it's out in the UK on the 3rd of July, and it's out in America and Canada on August 12th.
And when do we see it in Australia?
It's in November, and I don't know the exact date.
We'll put it in our show notes. Phoebe Greenwood, thank you, my sweetheart.
That was such a joy. Thank you so much, Sav.
Pleasure. That's it for this episode of 3 Food Memories.